Joining us for the first time, we're in a brand new series, the third week into the series of Living Rich. And if you haven't been here for a while, or maybe you're just tuning in online for the very first time, we've been talking about how to be rich. Because if any of us ever pass that magic line, and I don't know if it's that line in the sand or that hurdle that we come up against, if we pass that magic line and we actually become rich, we want to be better at it. Do we agree? Is that a good plan? So last week we discovered that most of us are at least richer than we thought we were. We discovered that we're at least a little bit richer, a little bit more well off than we thought we were. But we also talked about the problem being that we don't feel rich. We just don't feel rich. But compared to most of the people in the world, when we threw up all those stats, most of the people in the world, we are rich by comparison. We just don't feel rich. And that leaves us feeling kind of confused. And we talked about last week that in order to feel rich, in order to actually feel at least a little richer than you do today, we have to have that word, that magic word in our lives. And we said that word was margin. And margin, we also talked about that margin is that space between what we have. It's that space between our money and our obligations, right? It's how much we have and how much we're obligated to. That dictates this thing that we called margin. And the key to feeling rich isn't making a lot of money. It really isn't. The key to feeling rich is this word, margin. And we see and experience so many things, and when we wake up, and the way we do, and we think about some of the people we know, the way they wake up, but then when we see or experience real poverty, I've only got basic cable, right? Real poverty. When we see that, the likelihood is that we can become overwhelmed. And then we realize just how rich we are in comparison. But the reality for most of us is, after a moment like that, after seeing real and true poverty, we can actually start to not take it as much for granted, the things that we have. We start to feel a little bit blessed. We may even say to someone we know, wow, we're blessed. But then inevitably we come back to this world. We come back to this world of high expectations and upgrades. And suddenly that feeling that we had, that fuzzy feeling of actually understanding that we were better off than we thought we were, that feeling quickly dissipates. And the truth is, most of us, even in this difficult time today, in this difficult season of our lives, by national and certainly by international standards, we are at least richer than we thought. But one of the biggest problems is, as we get more money, something very strange happens. And we talked about this last week as well, and we called it the migration of hope. The migration of hope. And in the world we live in, the tendency is that when we get better jobs, right? When we start to move ahead, when we think we're advancing in life, our hope begins to shift from hoping in God to hoping in our stuff. It shifts from focusing on God, from trusting in God, from relying on God, from giving things to God, to focusing on our stuff. And we discussed, as our hope migrates, our hands begin to close. We hold on to that stuff. I think I shared in the past, growing up the way I did, my stepdad taught me at a very young age. If someone gives, you take. But if someone takes, you fight. That was a bad attitude. I wore that like a moniker. I wore that and thought that was cool. Yeah, fight. But it was the wrong state of mind. And somehow we begin to think that we can save our way in this migration, and we're holding on to stuff, and we've got those goals, and we're going to have this much in our bank accounts, right? We're going to achieve this goal in a certain amount of time or by a certain age. We think that we can save our way into safety. If we can just save enough money, if I can just gain enough wealth, then I'll be safe. Then we'll be secure. And the Apostle Paul said the problem with this is that we are shifting our hope into something that is so uncertain. Because at the end of our lives, when we're laying in the hospital bed, when we're on our deathbeds, when we know that the end is near, in that moment, in that split second moment, our hope is going to go suddenly from stuff back to God. Suddenly, we're going to have a clue. Suddenly, the way this started off with our hope shifting to our stuff, suddenly it's going to go back to the right order. But it's at the end. And so we made this declaration last week, and we said it together, and we even said it with a little bit of attitude, right? And I want, if you remember, I want you to say this with me. I will not place my trust in riches, but in him who richly provides. If I thank you. One person said that with me. Okay, you're all on my list. So today we're going to pick up where we left off in 1 Timothy 6:17. And this is again, remember, the Apostle Paul is giving Timothy this very specific message to give to rich people. And so we're going to look at this very specific set of instructions just in case any of us ever become rich. And so what he says is, command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, nor to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but to put their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. And so where we left off last week was with this question, how do we do that? We hear what you're saying, Pastor Tommy, but how do we do that? How do we stop that migration? How do we keep our hope from migrating? Or if our hope has migrated, regardless of how much wealth we have or don't have, how do we take it back? How do we try to put these things in the proper order before we're at the end of our journey? In the next part of this passage, the Apostle Paul begins to explain just how this is done. And so I want you to listen carefully. And you may even want to take a few notes, because this, I'm going to throw it out there. There's no bait and switch. This might actually be disturbing for some people. If you're a person who's come in here and you have this mindset because of the experiences you've had, the things you've seen, the things that people have done to you, and if you told me those stories, I'd probably say, yeah, I'd absolutely understand why you're coming from that. But if you're a person who thinks that church in general, they're just all about the money, all they want is your money, I don't want you to jump off the ledge just yet. I want you to bear with me. I want you to give this a chance. I want you to hear these things that we're going to talk and teach on, because we're not talking about the church. We're talking about how to keep your hope that should be in God, from migrating into something that is so incredibly uncertain. And here's what Paul says in 1 Timothy 6:18. Command them to. In other words, keep them from embracing this stuff instead of the one who provides this stuff, right? Keep them from focusing on the things as opposed to the one who gives them those things. And here's what they need to do. Command them to do good. And I really find this interesting. I love words. Words have meaning, even if I spell them wrong so often. Words have meaning, and listen to these words, because he doesn't command them to be good, right? He doesn't say be good, he says do good. And he doesn't command them to do good in an average way either, because we all have that instruction to do good for other people. Poor Christians have that instruction. Middle income Christians have that instruction. And yes, rich Christians have that instruction. We are to do good for other people. And yes, doing good for other people can look really different than what we see in our culture and society today, because I'm going to tell you, I'm going to let the cat out of the bag. I'm going to be so honest that I don't like how we like to be good. I don't like the lessons that we're taught and what it means to be good, to do good. I'm going to tell you the truth today. Not all the money in the world cannot take someone out of poverty. Poverty isn't about money. There are people that fall on hard times, absolutely. But poverty is this series of events. Poverty is this mindset. Poverty is this lack of hope. Some of the poorest people I've ever met in my life were far from in poverty because of where they had their hope. Paul he's talking specifically to these rich people, and he's saying we need to do good. But we need to do good in a better way. It's not just about money. In fact, he listened to the rest of this sentence. He says, command them to do good and to be rich in good deeds. Be rich in good deeds. In other words, don't just be an average do-gooder. Be an above-average do-gooder. Right? It's time to not just do good. We need to be like gooderific at this, right? Good and tabulous. And we're going to make new levels of doing good, because the more that we have, the more that we're blessed with. Are you ready for this? The more opportunity that we have to do more good than the average person. And this is hard for us. The more money we have, the more options we have, our time gets eaten up by these things that we just do for ourselves. And there's nothing, absolutely nothing wrong with enjoying ourselves. There's nothing, absolutely nothing wrong with having hobbies or any of those kinds of things. But in this passage, the Apostle Paul is warning that as our wealth increases, our opportunities increase. And as our opportunities increase, it eats up our time. And even though we may have more discretionary time than the average person, your inclination will not be to use that time to do good things for other people. Your inclination will be to consume that for yourselves. And here's what we already know. Whenever we have extra of anything, when we have extra something, our tendency is to waste it. Our tendency is absolutely to waste it. But let me show you how rich many of you are, because you may not have thought about this. Here's how rich some of you are. Some of you only have to work 5 days a week in order to have 7 days of food. Some of you only have to work 5 days a week in order to amass what you need for 7 days of food. Have you ever thought about that? In just 5 days, you can amass enough money for 7 days of food. In 5 days, you can amass enough money for 7 days of shelter for your family. That's not the way it is in so many areas of our world. Even in the U.S., it was just a couple generations ago. We're not too far removed that people had to work at least 6 days to amass enough for 7 days worth of food and shelter. And we are so blessed. We are blessed beyond belief, and we can take these little things for granted. Some pastor friends of mine had a wonderful opportunity to go to Honduras just a couple weeks ago, and they brought back all these photos. And there was this one family, the father, the husband bailed. Life was just too rough. He couldn't provide for his wife and his kids. I think there were 4 or 5 of them. And there's another man that stepped in, and he's kind of taken on that father figure role, and it was kind of a weird dynamic. They didn't talk about it. But he had to work 7 days a week to provide for that family. He worked for a farmer. He was out working in the fields for a farmer for $7 a day. And he felt blessed. They showed a picture. Every home they went to, these pastors, they brought a care package. It was simple. It was rice. It was maize. It was beans. And every time, those families wept. They wept for things that we pass by in the grocery store. They wept for something so basic. We are blessed. We are incredibly blessed. And just like last week, we're talking about this. We're describing these things, and yet nobody's up clapping. Nobody's up saying, woohoo, it's unbelievable. I had no idea how wealthy I was. I had no idea how good my family has. Because we fall into this mindset thinking that somebody owes us 2 days a week to do what we want to do. Somebody owes us that. We're entitled to that. And I'm going to say no. The reality is we live in a culture that is so unbelievably blessed that most of us only have to labor for 5 days to amass 7 days worth of life-giving stuff. And this is what that means. If we work 60 hours a week and we sleep 8 hours of night, which I know that most of you don't. I could tell by looking at you, you didn't get 8 hours last night. If you work 60 hours a week and you get 8 hours of sleep, this is incredible. This means that you have 52 hours a week to do anything you want. 52 hours a week to do anything your heart desires. And most of the people of this world do not have that. They don't have that much time. And I know you're going to say, but Pastor Tommy, I'm busy. And I'm going to say, I know you're busy. I know I'm busy. We're all busy. But the point is, those of us that have extra, we have extra responsibility. And the Apostle Paul says, I want you to be rich. I don't want you to be just average. I want you to be rich. I want you to be rich in good deeds. Because the richer and the wealthier you become, the more opportunities we have to do more things, more good things for people. And he continues in verse 6:18. Command them to do good and to be rich in good deeds and to be generous and willing to share. And why would he tell rich people to be generous and willing to share? Why would he take the time to map this out and say, hey, just so you know, be generous and willing to share? Do you think that the assumption is that rich people are generous? Do you think that the assumption is that rich people love to share? No. The opposite is usually true. It's not exclusively true. We're not painting people with a broad brush. But it's usually true. And we discovered over the last 2 weeks that the more money a person makes, including you and I, the less we want to give away. And the more money a person makes, the less generous they become. And what I'm about to say to you is so, so important. And I promise that we're not taking up an extra offering at the end of the service. There's no bait and switch here. I just want you to listen. Woohoo! Yeah. Unless you really, really want to. But I don't care whether you're a Christian or not, whether you're coming back to this church or not, whether you're going to tune in online or not. I'm here to tell the truth. God has put me, He has anointed me into this position to speak into your lives, and sometimes it's uncomfortable, and I will bear that. What I'm about to share are from the words of Jesus, and these are extraordinarily important. If this is ever going to get to your heart, it can actually transform every single facet of your life. Every single facet. This issue is not how many dollars. The issue is the percentage. The issue is not the number of dollars. Do you think for a single solitary minute that the creator of the heavens and the earth, of the entire universe, could ever be impressed by the amount of dollars that someone gives away? Do you think he could ever be impressed? God is not moved no matter how many zeros get tacked on to the end of your numbers. He's not moved by that at all. God is moved. And if Jesus is correct, and I'm going to tell you, I always go with Jesus being correct, because he's the one who died and came back to life, and I'm for that guy every single time. Can I get an amen? Jesus teaches that God is not impressed or moved or interested in these amounts. That God is impressed, he's moved by, he's interested in percentages. One day, Jesus is with his disciples in the temple, and he says, hey guys, come over here. I need you to see this. And in the temple, they didn't do offering the way we do. They didn't have a special time cut out of the service. In the temple, you gave as you were coming in or as you were leaving. It was just automatic. The buckets, the whatever, they were in the back. They gave just automatically. And they had it completely different. But one afternoon, Jesus sees something, and he draws his disciples in close to be able to witness this firsthand. And he makes this statement that is short, but is absolutely huge. And let me just read this story for you real quick. In Mark 12:41, Jesus sat down opposite the place where the offerings were put, and he watched the crowd putting their money into the temple treasury. And he sat there with his guys, right? He sat there with his dudes. He sat there with his disciples, and he watched. And he said, and everyone, the next one went through. And listen to what he says in 12:41 and 42. Many rich people threw in large amounts. They threw it in a way that they wanted it to be seen. These were large coins and denarii and gold and silver, and they're throwing these things in, making this sound, saying, look at me, look how much I'm giving. They threw it in such a way that everyone could tell that they were putting in these large amounts, right? Because they wanted to be seen. But a poor widow came and put in 2 very small copper coins worth only a few cents. And these coins were so small that there wasn't even a Roman or a Greek equivalent. That's why it doesn't list how much. They were so small, it was such a minute, small amount that they didn't even have a Roman or Greek equivalency to those coins. And what Jesus says next is so extraordinary. I don't care if you hear anything else I say today. Well, I kind of care. But if you could only take one thing, I would like this to permeate through your thinking. And listen to what he says in Mark 12:43. Calling his disciples to him, Jesus said, truly I tell you, this poor widow has put more into the treasury than all the others. These 2 coins that don't even have an equivalency of value, this poor widow put more into the treasury than all of the others. She was richer towards God than all of the others. What about the guy who threw in the $1,000? Her two little pieces were worth more than that $1,000. The guy that threw in the $10,000, her 2 little pieces were worth more than that $10,000. But how could that be more? Because Jesus says zeros at the end of numbers don't move me. They don't move me. Percentages move me. Jesus looked at this and he said to his guys, he said, I just wanted you to understand. I need you to understand that in the kingdom of heaven, it's about percentages given, not about the number of dollars. And he closes with this in 12:43. They all gave out of their wealth. They gave out of their wealth, out of their excess. But she, out of her poverty, put in everything, all she had to live on. And here's the thing. We don't like to think in terms of percentages. The only times we think in terms of percentages is at tax time, right? We need to think about percentages in every area of our lives and in terms of our finances, but not just in terms of our finances. Let me tell you what I know about you. You are absolutely living on a specific percentage of your income. And most of you don't know what that is. I would argue that, or wager, betting in church, I would wager that most of you do not know what that percentage is. And at some point, this is what we're now telling couples that when we're doing the premarital counseling and stuff, is that it is time we need to actually be better at this. We need to pick a percentage of our income to live on. It's not about a budget. Choose a percentage of your income that you're going to live on and always live on it. And as your income increases, as your lifestyle is going to increase, but you should have that M word that we talked about earlier, that margin. You're going to live on a percentage of your income because everybody does. But why not choose it and stick with it? Why not choose it? Why not set it? And I promise you, you will never regret that. You're going to call me someday. Those of you that might be visiting, and this is the only time, you're going to find a way to call me, and you're going to thank me. You're going to call me and say thank you because I now have margin. I've never had that. I haven't had that since I was 15 years old. I now have margin, and you'll have peace. And guess what? When you have that financial margin, you will feel rich. Rich. But if you live on 100% of your income, I don't care how much money you have. If you live on 100% of your income, you will feel pressure. You might feel millionaire pressure, but you're going to feel pressure. You need to know the percentage of your income that you live on. You need to know the percentage of your income that you save. That's important. You need to know the percentage of your income that you're generous with. You need to know these things because here's what happens. When it comes to this whole giving or being generous thing, most Americans don't decide a percentage. We are just hyper, spontaneous, and emotional. But at the end of the day, we gave something, right? But we're not thinking in terms of the percentage. And so we just see these dollars going out sporadically, and we feel like we're generous. We know it was just a couple weeks ago that I gave something to somebody. I know I gave something, but the problem is our Savior may look at us and say that we're not generous. In His eyes, we'd actually be greedy. And we're going to come back to Him and we're going to argue because that's what we do, right? We argue with God about so many trivial things. We argue with the Creator of the heavens and earth because somehow we know better and we've got a reason to justify these things. And we're going to come back with, but I gave this amount of dollars. And God is going to say, I am not impressed. I'm not impressed when you, my child, give out of your leftovers. Let me ask you this, because this isn't just about being rich in terms of money. This isn't just in terms of these savings and givings and living on. This percentage thing is about our entire lives. When you're in need, when you need help, which one of these two things means something to you? When your friend who doesn't have a job and he's sitting on the couch going through old Seinfeld reruns, right? And he says, I suppose I can help. I can help. And he helps, and you're grateful for that. And you got another friend that you know is crazy busy who says, wow, you're in help. I love you. You're my brother from another mother. I'm going to drop all this stuff. I'm going to prioritize you. I'm going to put you first. I'm going to give you the first of my time, and then I'll go back to those things. Which one of those things impresses you? When someone is willing to give first, when they're not giving out of the excess because it's convenient. Something as simple as time. When someone will give you time, when you know they have very little of it, that means something. This isn't just about money. And that's a big deal. The only way to ensure that your hope doesn't really migrate towards the accumulation of wealth is to pre-decide. The key is the pre-deciding of the income that we're going to live on. Pre-deciding the income that we're going to save. Pre-deciding the income we're going to invest. And yes, pre-deciding what we're going to give. Don't get caught up in the realities and the pressures of the moment. You need to pre-decide. I'm not suggesting for a minute that there's not a need that comes to you and you can't be spontaneous with that need. But in general, as a rule, walk into your life, in every part of your life, pre-deciding. Put it into your chores. Help out around the house first. Don't wait till your wife asks you. Amen. Preach it, girl. Yeah. Seriously, pre-decide. What are you going to do first? And here's what I'm going to tell you. That in fact, if you are prepared to do these things, you need to prepare yourself to be able to manage more. Because if you want to be good at being rich, if you ever want to have that margin, you need to pre-decide. And now here's how this works specifically. I would suggest that all of you pre-decide a percentage of your income that you're going to be generous with. And I don't care what that number is. I don't care if it's 1%. I don't care if it's 11%. I've been everywhere in that in my walk, in my pathetic parts of my walk. What that does is it prioritizes someone other than yourself. That way we're not giving the leftovers. That way we don't feel generous when in actuality we're not being generous. And I want to go back to what Paul said in the beginning about being rich in good deeds when possible, whether it's giving here to your church so that we can continue to share the gospel and spread life skills and relationships and hope and love, or some other organization that's advancing God's love, Christ's love. I would encourage you to spend time and do good within the context of those organizations. Not just give of your resources, but give of your time to those things that mean something to you. And if you do, here's what's going to happen. Those organizations are going to actually capture your heart. And in fact, one of the reasons that we loved the fact that so many of you volunteer here, as I was watching some of the people come back and forth a moment ago with our various church ministries, is because when you begin to volunteer, it captures your heart. It changes your heart. And you're combining both your time, your energy, and your income into something that matters to other people and is outside of you. You're putting other people first. And for that to be meaningful, it can't just be spontaneous. It can't. For there to be something to show for all of this, for something to happen inside of your heart, you have to pre-decide. I could not be standing here spending this time with you if it would not be for so many people working and moving in the background. If so many of you didn't pre-decide to get up on Sunday mornings a little bit early, show up and volunteer in one of the ministries, it was their pre-decision and it wasn't spontaneous. Imagine if Sunday mornings, every single one of our volunteers woke up and thought, I don't know if I should go today. Nah, let's not. We'll just play it by ear, right? If every Sunday morning we'll just wake up and decide how we feel in that moment, whether or not we're going to go help somebody. If we just make it all spontaneous, this whole thing would be a train wreck. This whole thing would be a disaster. We are blessed every single Sunday. Charities are blessed every single week because of the people here, the people like you that are living like they're rich. They're applying those things to their lives and they're living like they're rich. They pre-decide to do good. They pre-decide to be generous. They pre-decide to get involved and make these things work. Spontaneous generosity, spontaneous service, it's awesome. It really can be, but it's secondary. What makes this world go round, what makes the kingdom move forward, what makes a difference in this world, and what gives you something to look at and go, wow, my life had impact, is pre-deciding. And so here's what I want you to do. If you're going to be good at this being rich stuff, just in case you ever get rich, you need to go ahead and decide now, before you're rich. Pre-decide now, before you have that added pressure. Don't just be driven by emotion. Decide that you need to pick these numbers, because it's all about percentages. It's not about the amount. And so I want to answer this question, because I know you're asking it. How much? And I'm just going to ask you to find a starting place. And just so you know, the median household income, I looked this up, in our country is about $50,000 and some change. Total household income. That's not average, that's the median. And the group of people that make up this 50,000 average give about 5,000 to churches and charities and things like that, missional opportunities. They don't just give 5% on purpose, right? They give it by accident, because that's the norm. But here's what I mean by that. They didn't decide at the beginning of the year that let's give away 5% of our income. They discovered it at tax time. They discovered at tax time we accidentally, randomly, emotionally gave 5%. And so here's what I would suggest. If you're not a percentage giver, why not try to plug in around that? Even a little lower than that. I'm not saying do the same as the medium. I'm not suggesting that for a minute. That's not my job. That's between you and God. But instead of it being totally random and discovering at the end of the year, pre-decide. And I understand absolutely from my own life how foreign a concept that could be. And I'm going to share this with you, because I've had such a difficult walk with God. And it took so much pruning for God to work in my life. Regina and I's goal every year now is actually to give away 25% of what God blesses us with, because we realize that it wasn't ours to begin with. But I'm not saying that that is for you. I'm saying that this feels awesome for us. I'm not saying that anyone needs to come even half of that, quarter of that, a 25th of that. I'm sharing my heart. My walk is different than your walk. I don't know why God saved me when I was a kid, and I had cancer as a kid. I don't know why He brought me out of gang life. I don't know why He brought me out of poverty, eating from those garbage cans. I don't know how He brought me out of atheism. I don't know why He did those things. And almost 4 years ago says you have a 1% chance to live 1 year. When someone tells you that they are 99% sure of something, you pretty much think it's a done deal, right? That's a lock. How do you feel when someone tells you you have a 99%, we are 99% sure, with all of the medical knowledge that we have, all the fancy doodads, we are 99% sure you're not going to make it a year. And I'm still here. My number for me is not your number for you. My number for me is because I am grateful. I don't even understand why all this has happened, but I am grateful. He's left me here. He's kept me here. He has me doing things that I never thought I would do, and I'm not going to waste any of it. I'm bound and determined to say, God, keep trusting, because I have learned I cannot. It is impossible to outgive God. The more we bless people, and we don't just throw Band-Aids at problems. That doesn't help anybody. But the more we're there for people, the more we bless people, the more we're there in real time, in real situations, the more I don't ever have to worry. Not one time do I hear a need and have to sit there crunching the numbers. Can I do that? Can I help that person that I really think needs help? I know it's there. I know that if it wasn't there, God's going to put it there. I know that He has our lives intertwined for a reason. It's not spontaneous. It's His plan. I feel entrusted. And every year, as we in our home bless our church and the other charities and the people that we try to help, and we're trying to put them first, God keeps blessing us and using us in greater and amazing ways. But I just wanted you to start somewhere. I don't care if it's 1%. I remember 1%. I remember arguing with my wife, who was more faithful than I ever was. That, hey, this 4.7%, that's really close to 5. 10% is old law. That doesn't even count. It's not tithing. It's Christian generosity now. That doesn't even count. I remember those arguments. You're not going to hear any judgment from me. Your numbers, your percentages are between you and God. And I pray that those decisions are blessed beyond belief. And so if you've never decided a percentage, why not take this rich living challenge? You start wherever you need to and watch what God does in your life. But watch what God does in your heart. And let me wrap this whole thing up, and we'll pick up next week. Even more interesting stuff. The whole thing here in context in 1 Timothy 6:18, command them to do good and to be rich in good deeds and be generous and willing to share. In other words, to stop your hope from migrating, you might need to do more, maybe give more. But most important, you have to pre-decide what you're going to do, where you're going to live in your life. And before you go, I just want you to use your imagination just for one moment. Can you imagine what would happen if in our communities, what would happen in our country? And really think about this. Really broaden your imagination here. What would happen? Can you imagine what would happen in our communities and even our county if every Christian who didn't try to obey the Ten Commandments or the Bible or live by every law, but if every Christian, what if we just took this one piece, this little tiny part of the New Testament, Jesus' model and His teaching? What if we got this right? What if we got this one thing right? What if every Christian pre-decided, and I'm pre-deciding even a small amount, but what if we pre-decided that I'm giving this first, and I'm going to give my time to these organizations? I'm going to give my time where I give my finances so that it can capture my heart. What can you imagine what would happen when an individual pre-decides something happens in their heart and something happens in all of their finances and every other facet? Because when we give first, we begin to save better. When we begin to give first, we begin to spend less. And when we begin to understand what a demon, an absolute parasitic demon that debt is to you and your families, suddenly debt isn't keeping you from putting your money where your heart is. And suddenly the motivation to live more responsible in every area of our lives, including our finances, surfaces to the point where we don't just feel compelled, but we actually reorder those parts of our life. And if every Christian got this part right, something would happen to the heart of every Christian. But I'm going to tell you something even better than that. Something would happen in our city. Something would happen in our nation, because the face and the reputation of Christianity and the church would change overnight. We would no longer be known for what we're against. We wouldn't even be known for what we believe. We would be known for all of that extraordinary love. And as I read through the New Testament, we can't help but to come away and think. I think that this is what Jesus intended for our reputations to be like in the very beginning. He says, they will know that you're my disciples by what you believe. No. By what you're against. That's not what he said. They will know that you're my disciples by how well you love. And this isn't hyperbole. This is the thing that has the most potential to change a family, to change a community, to change a nation or even the world. Has more potential than anything else, because extraordinary generosity is extraordinarily powerful. So I'm asking you, is it time to be rich? Is it maybe time to feel a little bit rich? I challenge you to do that and watch what happens to your heart. Can we pray? Heavenly Father, I want to thank you again for preserving these texts and giving us these opportunities. For those that are in search of a job or something meaningful to do, and this isn't even the best season of their life, I would pray that you would provide for them and give them wisdom and how to apply these teachings. Because when things change for them, they want to do right by you. And for these men and women that are living on the razor's edge and they don't know where they're going to get the money for their next mortgage, I pray that they would be convicted to the point to make these changes today, and that they discover the painful reality of where they are and where they aren't, and also where they need to be. Gracious and Heavenly Father, I pray blessings upon our community. We don't want your love to stop at these four walls. We don't want your love just to stop at our children's ministry over there. Help us to pour out the essence of you. Help us to do a better job at loving our neighbors. Thank you for being so patient with us as we learn how to be better followers of you.